The prophetic blueprint written in Jewish history. There are stories in the Bible that feel distant, ancient, almost too extraordinary to touch. But then there is a story that refuses to stay in the past. A story still unfolding right before our eyes. A story written on scrolls thousands of years ago, yet confirmed by headlines, history books, and the very survival of a people who should not exist today. It begins with a question that echoes through time. How can a nation scattered, broken, hunted, and exiled for centuries still remain exactly as God said they would? When you look at the Jewish people, you are not just looking at a culture. You are looking at a prophecy in motion, a living miracle, a divine contradiction to every historical expectation. Empires rose and fell, kings came and went, armies marched, cities burned, and while the world tried again and again to erase the Jews from the earth, something impossible kept happening. They remained, they endured, they preserved language, memory, scripture, identity, even when scattered across continents. And if you listen closely, beneath the noise of wars and centuries, you hear a whisper that has never faded. I will not forsake them. Their survival is not an accident. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is evidence. Quiet, consistent, stubborn evidence that what God promises, He performs. So tonight, I want to take you on a journey through deserts and kingdoms, through the ashes of exile and the hope of return, through prophecy, persecution, miracles, and mystery. A journey that reveals a truth every believer needs to hear. If God kept His word to a nation for thousands of years, He can keep His word to you. This is the story of prophetic persistence. This is the story of the Jewish people. And this right now is where the mystery begins. Chapter 1. The people who should have disappeared. If you were to open a history book, not the Bible, not theology, but a secular textbook, you would quickly notice a troubling pattern. Nations rise, nations fall, languages vanish, cultures dissolve, entire peoples fade into dust, remembered only by ruins and artifacts buried beneath the earth. The Hittites, gone. The Philistines, gone. The Assyrians, gone. The Babylonians, gone. Powerful, feared, advanced civilizations, erased by time. And by every earthly measure, the Jews should have joined them. Think about it, a tiny nation, surrounded by giants, repeatedly invaded, conquered, enslaved, exiled, scattered. No kingdom, no military power, no land, no throne, no empire. Everything that keeps a people alive, they lost. Everything but one thing, a promise. But history didn't want them. Empires did not tolerate them. Centuries did not accommodate them. From the moment they entered the pages of history, they faced forces far greater than themselves. Egypt tried to crush them under slavery. Babylon tried to erase their future by destroying their temple. Persia tried to annihilate them in a single day under Haman's decree. Greece tried to corrupt them. Rome tried to scatter them to the ends of the earth. And yet, every time the world expected them to disappear, something unexpected happened. They came back. They rebuilt. They remembered. Other nations vanish after a single exile. The Jews survived multiple. Other cultures dissolve after one scattering. The Jews were scattered for nearly 2,000 years and kept their identity intact. Other peoples lose their language after a generation. The Jews revived theirs after millennia, exactly as prophecy said. This is not normal. This is not natural. This is not simply good cultural memory. This is divine preservation. Because when God told Abraham, I will make you into a great nation, He wasn't speaking metaphorically. When He said through Jeremiah that He would endure as long as the sun and moon, He wasn't exaggerating. When He promised through Moses that they would be scattered but never destroyed, He meant it. The Jewish existence is the proof. Their survival breaks every pattern in world history. Their story mocks the predictions of kings and scholars. Their endurance defies logic, statistics, and sociology. And whether the world recognizes it or not, the Jewish people stand as a quiet miracle, a living testimony that what God declares cannot be undone by armies or empires. But there is something deeper, something personal, hidden inside this historical mystery. Because if God preserved a nation that lost everything, if he sustained a people surrounded by enemies, if he kept his promise through deserts, wars, persecutions, and exiles, then what does that say about his promises to you? You, who feel overwhelmed. You, who feel scattered inside. You, who fear that your struggles might erase you. You, who wonder if God has forgotten your name. The Jewish story whispers a truth for your soul. God keeps his word. No matter the pressure, no matter the darkness, no matter the odds. History tried to bury them, but prophecy kept them alive. And now, as we step into the next chapter, we look at the ancient voices who spoke these impossible predictions long before history unfolded. The prophets who told the story before the world even wrote it. Chapter 2. The prophets who spoke before history happened. Long before the exiles, long before the persecutions, long before the rise and fall of empires, there were voices. Ancient, trembling, fiery voices. Ancient, trembling, fiery voices. Men who stood between heaven and earth, with a message no one wanted to hear, yet everyone needed. The prophets, they spoke of things no human could predict. They described events no nation had ever imagined. They declared outcomes that seemed impossible, absurd even, at the time they were spoken. And yet, history would obey every word. Take Moses, for example. He looked at a people just beginning their journey and said something shocking. You will be scattered among the nations, but you will not be destroyed. Who says that about a nation still rising, still united, still forming its identity? Or Isaiah, who declared that Israel would one day be a nation born in a single day. A prophecy so strange that scholars mocked it for centuries, until May 14, 1948. When the world watched it happen in real time. Jeremiah spoke of the land becoming desolate, yet never forgotten. Ezekiel spoke of dry bones coming back to life, a metaphor that would become painfully literal after centuries of Jewish suffering. Hosea said Israel would live many days without a king, without a temple, yet still remain a distinct people. No other nation has ever lived out such a script. No other people have matched prophecy with such accuracy. No culture has returned from the dead as scripture foretold, except the Jews. You see, biblical prophecy is not vague. It isn't symbolic poetry. It's precise, detailed, daring. The prophets predicted a scattering, a survival, a preservation of identity, a return to the land, a revival of language, a rebirth of a nation. And every one of those things happened exactly as written. Imagine this for a moment. A people losing their homeland for centuries, yet never losing themselves. A culture pushed into every corner of the planet, yet still carrying the same scriptures, same traditions, same prayers. A language going silent, then roaring back to life as the mother tongue of millions. This is not ordinary history. This is not cultural coincidence. This is prophecy unfolding. Prophecy is God's handwriting across time. It is the echo of a future God already sees. And the Jewish people, their endurance, their return, their identity, are the living proof that those ancient words were not the imagination of men, but the voice of God whispering into human history. But here is something even more powerful. These prophecies were not just about Israel. They were also about faith, about you, about every believer who wonders if God truly holds the future. Because if God fulfilled prophecies written thousands of years before they unfolded, if he orchestrated events across continents, kingdoms, and centuries to keep his word, then you can be sure of this. He can lead your life. He can guide your steps. He can fulfill his promises to you, no matter how impossible they seem. The prophets never spoke empty words, and as we move forward in this journey, we step into the heart of their predictions. The long, painful, miraculous season the scriptures described in detail long before it happened, the exile. Chapter 3. Exile. The longest survival story ever told, exile. A word that tastes like dust, a word that carries the sound of broken cities, weeping families, and roads that lead away from everything familiar. For most nations, exile is the end. Identity fades, language dissolves, memory disappears. History closes the book. But for the Jewish people, exile became a stage where prophecy and perseverance collided. It began with destruction, Jerusalem burning, the temple, their heart, their identity, their meeting place with God, reduced to ashes. The Babylonians didn't just conquer a city, they tried to erase a calling. Imagine the trauma. Imagine walking through ruins where your childhood once lived. Imagine being chained, marched across desert lands, wondering if God had abandoned you forever. And yet, in the middle of their deepest despair, something extraordinary happened. They did not lose their faith. They did not lose their name. They did not lose their God. While other nations absorbed into their captors, Israel did something unheard of. They kept their identity alive in foreign soil. They carried scripture into exile. They carried Sabbath into exile. They carried memory into exile. They carried hope into exile. The world expected them to disappear, but instead they built community. They preserved scripture. They wrote prayers and psalms that still comfort us today. They kept believing the promise, I will gather you again. The Babylonian exile was only the beginning. Rome would come centuries later, stronger, harsher, merciless. They destroyed the Second Temple. They scattered the Jews across continents. They renamed the land to disconnect the people from their identity. And still, the story refused to end. From Spain to North Africa, from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, from city to village to ghetto to refugee camp, they carried something no empire could crush, a covenant. Empires punished them, kings expelled them, villages blamed them, wars forced them into hiding, diaspora scattered them like seeds in the wind. But everywhere they landed, they remembered Zion, they remembered the promise, they remembered who they were. Even their rituals became acts of rebellion against history itself. Lighting a menorah in a foreign city, reading Torah under threat, praying toward a land they hadn't seen in generations, teaching their children Hebrew words spoken by ancestors thousands of years earlier. Those acts were not just tradition, they were survival. They were prophecy being kept alive. No other people in history stayed intact after even one major exile. Yet the Jews survived too, one ancient, one global, each lasting centuries. No other people maintained unity without homeland, temple, or king. No other nation kept a promise alive longer. Their endurance was not natural, it was supernatural. It was the echo of God's voice saying, "You will not be destroyed." And here is the mystery. The exile did not break them, it refined them. It sharpened their identity. It pressed scripture deeper into their bones. It forced them to cling to the one thing no conqueror could steal, the covenant written by God Himself. So when the world thought they were finished, they were actually being prepared. Because exile was never the final chapter. It was the doorway to something miraculous. Something history still struggles to explain. A return, a rebirth, a revival no one expected. And that is where we go next. Into the ashes, into the hopeless places, into the moment prophecy swept back into human history with breathtaking force. Chapter 4. Miracles in the Ashes. The Unexpected Return. If exile was the wound, the return was the miracle no one believed could happen. Think for a moment about what it means for a nation to come back from the dead. Not a family, not a tribe, a whole nation. A people scattered across continents, speaking different languages, living under different flags, praying in different accents, suddenly finding their way home after centuries. This is not normal history. This is prophecy breathing. The first return came under Cyrus. the Persian king, a pagan ruler, not a believer, not a worshipper of the God of Israel, suddenly announcing that the Jews were free to go back and rebuild. Why would he do that? Why would an emperor release captives for no benefit? Because Isaiah had said it 150 years earlier, called him by name before he was even born, declared he would let the Jews go, and when Cyrus rose to power, he walked straight into Prophecies' script. But that was only the beginning. Centuries passed, empires shifted, the Jews were scattered again, not for decades but for nearly 2,000 years. By every rule of history, they should have disappeared, assimilated, absorbed, forgotten. And then, something impossible happened. The land of Israel, barren, dry, neglected for centuries, began to awaken. Small communities returned. Farmers drained swamps. Villagers planted vineyards. Hebrew, a language that lived only in prayer books, started breathing again on the tongues of children playing in the streets. The world barely noticed at first, but prophecy noticed. Because Ezekiel had said the land would flourish again. Because Isaiah had said deserts would bloom. Because Jeremiah had said God would bring his people back from the north, the south, the east, and the west. And then came the ashes, the darkest chapter, the Holocaust, evil, brutal, unspeakable. 6 million lives extinguished. The world watched the unspeakable. The Jewish people looked like they were disappearing once more. But even in the ashes, something stirred. From the horrors of devastation came a cry for restoration, a global vote, a declaration, a moment that stunned the world. May 14th, 1948. One day, one moment, one nation, reborn. Isaiah's prophecy fulfilled word for word. A nation born in a single day. The flag rose. The ancient language returned as official speech. Children learned prayers their ancestors whispered in exile. The land responded, blooming, growing, prospering. But the miracle wasn't political. It wasn't military. It wasn't strategic. It was prophetic. A people exiled for centuries, living again in the land God promised. A nation destroyed repeatedly, restored again and again. A language dead, revived. A homeland erased, rewritten. A prophecy doubted, fulfilled in front of the entire world. And here lies the deeper revelation. If God could bring a scattered nation back to life, if he could revive what history declared dead, if he could gather people from the ends of the earth and give them a home again, then he can resurrect the ruins in your life too. The return of Israel is not just a historical event. It is a divine message, a reminder that no situation is too far gone, no heart too broken, no dream too buried, no story too ruined, because the God who brought Israel back is the same God writing your story. And now, as we move forward, we confront one of the most painful, powerful truths in this journey: the centuries of suffering, persecution, and resilience that shaped the Jewish identity into a sign for all generations. Chapter 5. Against all odds, survival through persecution. History has a cruel rhythm, a pattern that repeats in every century, a dark drumbeat that chased the Jewish people from kingdom to kingdom, from continent to continent. And yet, somehow, they endured every blow. This chapter is not easy to walk through. It is filled with shadow, with fire, with wounds carried across generations. But it is also where one of the greatest miracles of prophetic persistence shines the brightest. Because persecution did not destroy them. Persecution revealed the God who carried them. It began in the ancient world. Empires treated the Jews with suspicion because they worshipped one God when everyone else worshipped many. Their faith made them different. Their covenant made them stand out. Their identity made them targets. After Babylon came Persia. A single decree, signed by Haman, could have wiped out every Jew in the empire. But God turned the script. A Jewish woman named Esther rose in a palace not her own, and preservation came from a place no one expected. Then came Greece, forcing its culture, language, and gods onto every nation. But the Jews resisted. The Maccabees fought back. The temple was reclaimed. Light shone again in darkness. Rome came next, merciless, powerful, determined to crush anything that challenged its authority. They destroyed the temple. They scattered the people. They renamed the land to sever identity from place. They expected Judaism to collapse. It didn't. Then came the long centuries, the Middle Ages, the Crusades, the expulsions from England, France, Spain, the ghettos of Europe, the blood libels, the restrictions, the hatred, the lies, the laws meant to isolate, silence, erase them. But somehow, every time, Jewish life continued. Everywhere they were pushed, they rebuilt. Everywhere they were scattered, they prayed. Everywhere they were despised, they kept the covenant alive. And then, the darkest night of all, the Holocaust. 6 million lives, families shattered, communities erased, children, scholars, mothers, rabbis, gone. The enemy believed this would be the final blow, that the Jewish story would end in flames and ashes. But even in death camps, something unbelievable happened. They whispered prayers. They blessed the name of God. They taught their children a faith the world tried to silence. They protected Torah scrolls. They sang ancient melodies in the cold barracks of despair. Their bodies were broken, but their identity, their covenant, their spiritual pulse refused to die. And when the dust settled, the world witnessed something history cannot explain. The Jewish people rising again, from ashes to homeland, from mourning to restoration, from the shadow of extermination to the rebirth of a nation. This is not human resilience alone. This is divine preservation. This is prophecy unfolding in real time. This is God keeping his promise when the world tried to break it. And here's the powerful truth at the heart of this chapter. The persecution that should have erased them became the platform for God to reveal his faithfulness. Every time the world pushed them down, God lifted them up. Every time enemies tried to erase their name, God wrote it deeper into history. Every time darkness tried to end the story, God reignited the flame. And if God can preserve a people through centuries of persecution, if he can carry them through wars, kingdoms, hatred, and genocide, then he can carry you through whatever battles you face. This story is not just about the Jewish people. It is about the God who never lets go. And now, we step into the next revelation, understanding why their survival matters not only to history, but to the entire world. Chapter 6. A sign for the nations. What Israel reveals about God. If the Jewish story were only about survival, it would already be astonishing. If it were only about culture, language, or tradition, it would still be one of the greatest sagas ever told. But the deeper you look, the more you realize something far greater is happening. Something spiritual, something prophetic, something that points beyond history, directly to the heart of God. Because Israel is not just a nation. Israel is a sign, a living message, a divine billboard standing in the middle of human history that says, God keeps his promises. Think about it. The Jewish people are the only nation on earth whose entire existence was written before it happened. Their rise, predicted. Their fall, predicted. Their exile, predicted. Their preservation, predicted. Their return, predicted. Their impact on the world, predicted. No other nation carries a script this detailed, this ancient, and this accurate. And that accuracy forces us to face a truth many want to ignore. Israel did not survive because of luck. They survived because God said they would. When you study their history, you see God's fingerprints everywhere, not in the absence of suffering, but in the refusal of suffering to destroy them, not in the avoidance of exile, but in the protection of identity through exile, not in a smooth path, but in a preserved purpose. Israel stands as a visible reminder to the world that God is faithful, even when circumstances are bleak, even when empires tower above them, even when the world expects them to disappear. But there's more. Israel reveals the character of God. It reveals his consistency. He does not say one thing and do another. It reveals his sovereignty. No kingdom, no army, no ideology can undo his will. It reveals his mercy. Even when the people strayed, God kept calling them back. It reveals his patience, a covenant that spans thousands of years, held together by a grace deeper than rebellion. And it reveals his power, because no human force could orchestrate a story this precise. Israel is proof that God writes long stories, and he finishes what he starts. Their existence also reveals something essential for every believer. If God kept a promise to a nation for 4,000 years, he will keep his promises to you. If he can restore a land, he can restore your life. If he can revive a language, he can revive your hope. If he can gather a scattered people, he can gather the broken pieces of your heart. Israel's story is not meant to be admired from a distance. It is meant to be understood personally, because God did not preserve them just for history. He preserved them for testimony, a living example of what unwavering divine faithfulness looks like. And here is the mystery many overlook. Every time Israel rises, it signals something to the world. Every return, every restoration, every fulfilled prophecy whispers, God is still moving. God is still speaking. God is still writing the story. Israel is the clock. Israel is the signpost. Israel is the living reminder that we are part of a plan much bigger than ourselves. So as we move forward, we shift from the nation as a sign to the people as an inspiration. Their inner strength, their unshakable identity, the flame that kept burning, even when the world tried to put it out. Because the next chapter reveals not just history, but the heart behind their endurance. Chapter 7. Faith that refuses to die. When you strip away the headlines, the wars, the politics, the empires, when you silence the noise of history and listen closely, you hear something deeper behind the Jewish story. A heartbeat, a rhythm, a quiet, steady, unwavering pulse that carried them through every century. Faith, not the kind of faith that comes and goes with emotion, not the fragile kind that breaks under pressure, but a faith woven into identity, carried from parent to child, preserved in memory, in prayer, in scripture, in the smallest details of everyday life. This is the faith that refused to die. Picture a Jewish family in Babylon, living in a land not their own, surrounded by foreign gods, foreign languages, foreign laws. Yet at sunset, they light Sabbath candles, they sing ancient prayers, they open scrolls written by prophets who warned them of exile, yet also promised restoration. They hold on to words older than the empire enslaving them. Picture a rabbi in medieval Europe, teaching children Hebrew letters while outside. Hatred grows, soldiers march, restrictions tighten. But inside the small dim room he whispers, "Shema Israel," and those children whisper it back. The world outside rages, but the flame of faith inside that room does not go out. Picture a mother in the 20th century, hiding her child in a time of unspeakable evil. She has lost everything, yet she clings to one belief that God has not forgotten them. And somehow, even in the darkest night, she teaches her child a prayer. This is what the world never understood. The Jewish people didn't survive because of numbers, or armies, or wealth, or land. They survived because of something invisible, a covenant carried in their hearts. Their traditions were not simply rituals. They were anchors. Every prayer was a reminder, every feast a memory, every song a declaration. We are still here. God is still with us. Faith for them was not a matter of convenience. It was oxygen. It was survival. It was identity, when identity was under attack. And this faith did something extraordinary. It refused to adapt to the world. Instead, it shaped the world around it. In exile, the Jewish people didn't dissolve. They built communities. They established synagogues. They wrote commentaries. They preserved scripture with breathtaking precision. They became wanderers, but never lost the map inside their souls, pointing back to God and back to Zion. That is the strength of prophetic faith. It endures when logic says it shouldn't. It shines brightest when the night is darkest. It whispers hope when circumstances scream despair. It outlasts kingdoms. It outlives enemies. It carries a people from generation to generation, even when everything around them collapses. But here's the part that many people miss. Their faith does not only explain their survival, it also explains yours. Because the God who sustained them is the same God who sustains you. Their story is not only a testimony of national endurance, it is a blueprint for personal endurance. When you feel scattered, remember the God who gathers. When you feel forgotten, remember the God who remembers his covenant. When life pushes you into exile, emotional, spiritual, or relational, remember that the same God who carried Israel carries you. Their faith points to a greater truth. God does not abandon his promises, not to nations, not to individuals, not to you. And now, with this truth alive in your heart, we step into the final chapter, what their extraordinary story means for your own journey, your own struggles, your own walk with God. Conclusion: the story that refuses to die. When we look back at everything the Jewish story has carried, the exile, the return, the persecution, the revival, the prophecies fulfilled with impossible accuracy, we begin to see something crystal clear. This is not just history. This is a message, a divine message written across thousands of years, spoken through a people who were never meant to survive, yet did. The Jews were scattered, but not erased, crushed, but not destroyed, hated, but never abandoned, wounded, but always rebuilt. Why? Because God said they would live, because his covenant held, because his promises stood stronger than empires, kings, armies, and centuries. And their story speaks to you, right now in the quiet place of your heart. It tells you that when life pushes you into corners you never chose, God can still carry you. It tells you that when everything around you feels broken, God can still rebuild. It tells you that no exile lasts forever, and no darkness can silence what God has spoken over your life. The Jewish people are living proof that God keeps his promises, and if he kept his promise for a nation across 4,000 years, he will keep his promise to you today. So as you close this message, take a breath. Let the story settle in your spirit. Let it remind you that you are held by a faithful God, the same God who wrote history, who shaped nations, who preserves his people through every storm. If this journey stirred something in you, stay close, reflect on it, share it. And if you want to explore more mysteries, more stories, more evidence of God's hand in our world, subscribe, keep walking with us, and let's uncover these truths together. Because the story isn't finished, and neither are you.